Black CEO, publicly insulted by billionaire heiress hours. Later, her entire empire collapsed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. You don't belong at this table. The words didn't just break the room, they sliced it open. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The heiress stood over her like a storm breaking loose. Charlotte Waverly, shimmering in an emerald gown, diamonds trembling under the chandelier light, jabbed her finger toward the woman seated calmly at the linen-draped table. Her voice ricocheted through the ballroom, ringing off marble walls and polished silver. I said, "You don't belong here." Gasps fluttered like startled birds. A violinist missed a note. Somewhere near the centerpieces of white hydrangeas, a man tried to pretend he hadn't heard, though his jaw tensed. But the woman being screamed at didn't flinch. A soft orange glow from her dress, elegant, understated, almost defiantly simple, contrasted sharply with the storm of entitlement towering above her. Her hair was pulled back in a smooth, low bun, her posture straight, her breath steady. She didn't cling to her glass. She didn't rise to defend herself. She simply existed with a dignity that only made Charlotte's rage burn hotter. The room shifted around her the way crowds do when they smell scandal. Guests angled in their seats, the motion smooth and synchronized like a tide turning. A few phones lifted. Others pretended not to film. Charlotte's voice sharpened. "This section is for major donors," she spat, each syllable coated with decades of inherited arrogance, not people who just wandered in. A ripple of cruel, uncertain laughter ran through the tables, not because the joke was funny, but because power commands imitation. The young black woman lifted her eyes at last, calm, unshaken. Her silence was not retreat, it was measurement. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. The ballroom lights gleamed across crystal glasses, catching reflections of shock, amusement, discomfort, a mosaic of people revealing who they truly were in a single moment. A waiter froze mid-step, torn between training and conscience. A businessman whispered, "Is she serious?" but didn't look brave enough to intervene. Charlotte leaned closer, her tone dropping into something venomous and intimate. "You people always push your way into spaces meant for better company." The final word better hung in the air like poison gas. The insult landed with the weight of centuries, but the woman in orange only inhaled once, slow and precise. She reached for her napkin, placing it down with the kind of grace that made cruelty look small beside her. And in that quiet gesture, something in the atmosphere cracked. The laughter dimmed. The music faltered. The chandelier light felt colder, harsher, as if the room itself sensed the shift in gravity. She lifted her gaze again, not upward toward Charlotte's rage, but outward, sweeping across the crowd that had chosen to witness instead of intervene. Her eyes said what her voice didn't. Remember this moment. Remember who you chose to be. Because the woman they were mocking was not a guest, not a mistake, not someone who had wandered into the wrong room. In a few hours, they would learn exactly who she was and why one careless moment of arrogance would cost Charlotte Waverly her entire empire. The room was still trembling from Charlotte's outburst when the narrator's voice settled over the scene like a quiet lens focusing. To understand why this moment would echo far beyond white tablecloths and golden chandeliers, you have to understand her. The woman in the orange dress. She sat there, posture unmoved, as if humiliation were nothing more than weather, merely something that passed over her skin without permission to enter. Guests watched her, expecting outrage, protest, flustered excuses. Instead, she simply reached for her water glass and lifted it with the steadiness of a mountain. Her name was Naomi Sinclair, but almost no one in that room recognized her face. That was intentional. While her peers craved magazine covers, Naomi built empires quietly, the kind of silence that reshapes industries before anyone knows they've shifted. At 38, she was the founder and CEO of Sinclair Equinox, a global investment firm valued at over $42.7 billion, with holdings in renewable infrastructure, tech accelerators, medical robotics, and philanthropic venture networks. To the public, she was a myth. To the markets, she was gravity. And to the Waverly family, though they didn't know it yet, she was survival. The gala tonight, the one dripping in old money charm, staged beneath chandeliers heavy with history, had one secret purpose: to secure a lifeline for Charlotte's crumbling inheritance. Over the last 3 years, the Waverly Foundation had patched over financial fractures with theatrics, prestige, and carefully curated illusions. Their empire wasn't dying loudly. It was rotting quietly, from the inside out. And Naomi Sinclair was the only investor powerful enough and willing enough to save it. Charlotte thought she was insulting a stranger. She was insulting the board's last hope. Outside the ballroom, in a quiet control room lit by screens and spreadsheets, Naomi's team was already monitoring the event. They had projected that tonight's announcement, a partnership with Sinclair Equinox worth nearly $3 billion, would stabilize the Waverly dynasty for another decade. Until Charlotte pointed her manicured finger and spat, "You don't belong here." Inside the ballroom, Naomi's phone buzzed once. Rachel, senior strategist. "Standing by for your signal." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Not yet. Her gaze traveled across the table to the donors, still pretending not to watch. Men with tailored suits and curated laughs. Women with diamonds arranged like armor. Their eyes told a story. Entitlement accepts cruelty when it comes from its own bloodline. Then, another message blinked. Lucas, chief analyst. Reminder: tonight's deal finalizes at midnight. Are we proceeding? Naomi tapped the screen once to silence it. Her breathing stayed even. Across the room, Charlotte Waverly was still basking in the attention her cruelty had purchased. Photographers looked away, unsure, but not enough to intervene. The conductor lifted his hand to restart the music, but the orchestra's first note wavered, as if the instruments themselves sensed the shift in the air. Naomi had endured worse than this in boardrooms, in banks, in classrooms where people with smaller minds assumed they understood her potential because they understood her skin. But tonight was different. Tonight, a signature, her signature, would determine whether the Waverlys survived. She placed her napkin neatly on her lap, the motion precise, deliberate. Her fingers brushed the curve of her clutch, though she didn't open it. Not yet. The power wasn't in the gesture, it was in the patience. For the first time since Charlotte's outburst, Naomi spoke softly, to the waiter still standing frozen beside her. "Don't worry," she said, voice calm as a shoreline. "The night isn't ruined." He blinked, surprised. She continued, almost a whisper. "It's just beginning." And though the ballroom didn't hear her words, something in the air shifted, the kind of shift only predators can sense, right before the balance of the hunt turns. Hours from now, the world would replay this moment and say it began here, with a cruel heiress, a quiet CEO, and a sentence that snapped an empire in half. Charlotte Waverly had always known how to command a room. She inherited that skill the same way she inherited everything else, unearned, unexamined, and utterly unquestioned. From the outside, she was the perfect heir, a blonde crown polished by generational wealth, wrapped in emerald silk and photographed beneath chandeliers as if they existed solely to halo her shoulders. But the closer you looked, the more cracks you saw. Her smile, bright, practiced, never reached her eyes. Her posture, elegant, rigid, revealed the strain of holding up a legacy she never built. Her voice, sharp, authoritative, trembled at the edges, not with strength but fear of slipping from the pedestal she stood on. And tonight, behind that confidence, a secret screamed. Because the Waverly Empire was dying. Not dramatically, Not publicly, but in the slow, suffocating way dynasties collapse when the people in charge mistake inheritance for intelligence. For decades, the Waverlys controlled shipping, pharmaceuticals, luxury real estate. Wealth piled on wealth. They built glass towers, funded headline galas, graced magazine covers. Their foundation, the one Charlotte flaunted so proudly, was once a golden beacon of old money benevolence. Then, 3 years ago, everything began to rot. A series of catastrophic miscalculations by her father. A pharmaceutical lawsuit Charlotte swore would disappear but didn't. A real estate blunder her brother masked with fraudulent valuations. Debt hidden behind shell companies. Investors whispering. Auditors circling. And the most important truth of all, the only thing keeping them alive was tonight's $3B partnership with Sinclair Equinox. But Charlotte didn't know that. Not fully. Not the way her father did. At the head of the ballroom, Richard Waverly sat stiff in his tailored navy suit, the same smile plastered on his face since he arrived, a smile stretched too tight, like wallpaper hiding cracks in the wall. He watched Charlotte's outburst with the frozen expression of a man who couldn't afford to scold his daughter publicly, even when she jeopardized everything. Beside him was Ethan Waverly, Charlotte's younger brother, handsome, careless, poorly disguised as competent. He swirled his wine with a bored flick, oblivious to the fact that the future he was drinking through came from money that didn't exist anymore. They didn't notice Naomi Sinclair watching them silently, steadily absorbing every detail the way architects study a collapsing structure. Charlotte, meanwhile, basked in her imagined victory. She mistook the room's silence for agreement, not discomfort. She mistook the glances for admiration, not alarm. She mistook Naomi's composure for weakness, not strategy. But a few tables away, someone else knew better. Lena Rowe, CFO of the Waverly Foundation, watched Charlotte with the strained patience of a woman who had spent years stitching holes in a sinking ship. Her eyes flicked toward Naomi, recognition dawning, horror sharpening. Because Lena had seen Naomi Sinclair before. Not in person, Naomi avoided cameras with a precision bordering on art, but in financial reports, acquisition histories, competitive intelligence sheets. And she knew exactly what Sinclair Equinox could do to a company. Build it, save it, or bury it with one signature. Lena reached for her phone under the table, typing urgently. Lena, Richard, you need to stop Charlotte. Now. You don't understand who that woman is. Richard didn't read it. He was too busy pretending everything was fine. Charlotte, completely unaware of the tectonic plates shifting beneath her feet, delivered her final flourish, the line she would later replay in her own mind with dread. I'm tired of people pretending they belong in places built for families like mine. The arrogance was stunning. The timing was fatal. Across the table, Naomi simply blinked once, slow, deliberate the way a surgeon might acknowledge the moment just before the incision is made. If Charlotte had understood that look, she might have apologized. If Richard had understood it, he might have intervened. If Ethan had understood it, he might have sobered. But none of them did. And in that ignorance, the Waverly Empire sealed its fate. The ballroom hummed with fragile elegance, silverware, violins, murmurs, stitched together into a fabric that pretended nothing had happened. But beneath that fabric, something darker stirred. Naomi Sinclair hadn't moved for nearly a full minute. Her stillness unnerved the room more than Charlotte's screaming had. It was the stillness of someone collecting variables, measuring outcomes, running silent calculations behind calm eyes. Then her phone vibrated once a discreet tremor against the tablecloth. Rachel, senior strategist. Board members online, awaiting your direction. Naomi glanced at the message, then at Charlotte, who was now laughing too loudly, clinging to donors who smiled only because they had been trained to appease power, not because they agreed with her. The chandelier light glinted off Charlotte's emerald gown, scattering cold reflections across Naomi's skin. She felt none of it. Her attention was elsewhere, on the pattern of downfall beginning to form. She exhaled once. Then she reached for her clutch. It was a small movement, delicately executed, but the people nearest her felt something shift, like air tightening before a storm, like gravity subtly changing direction. Inside the clutch, her phone screen lit her fingertips in a soft blue glow. One message box was already open, one draft already waiting. Naomi typed a single word. Initiate. No escalation. No explanation. No anger. Just a decision. She hit send. And somewhere far beyond the ballroom and boardrooms, server rooms, and encrypted communication channels, the first domino fell. Deep inside Sinclair Equinox headquarters, a team of analysts watching the gala on muted screens saw the notification flash at the top corner. Protocol A7 activated. Lucas, the chief analyst, leaned forward. Is that final? Rachel nodded slowly. She wouldn't have pressed it if it wasn't. Within seconds, automated processes began to move not loudly, not with spectacle, but with surgical precision. Investment recall requests dispatched to 6 global banks. Credit risk reassessment triggered for all Waverly-linked accounts. Pending capital infusions halted mid-transfer. Legal teams quietly pulled documents from virtual data rooms. Partner audits initiated without warning. To the outside world, nothing looked different. But to the Waverlys, the oxygen line had just been cut. Back in the ballroom, Naomi placed her clutch down with the same care she had used to pick it up. That was the only outward sign that anything had changed. A waiter, still shaken by Charlotte's earlier outburst, stepped toward her. "Mom, are you okay?" Naomi offered him a gentle, almost comforting smile. "I'm perfectly fine," she said, "but others won't be." Across the room, Charlotte was still holding court, oblivious, triumphant, drunk on the attention her cruelty had harvested. She didn't notice the event coordinator receiving a frantic text. She didn't notice the Waverly CFO's face draining of color. She didn't notice her father suddenly pressing a hand to his chest, not in pain but in panic, the instinctive panic of a man who senses, without knowing why, that something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. Naomi watched them all in silence. Her phone vibrated again. Rachel. Confirmation. Capital withdrawal locked. Estimated impact window. 3 hours. A second message followed immediately. "Are you sure you want to proceed? This will collapse them, Naomi." Naomi's eyes softened, not with pity, but with clarity sharpened by years of being underestimated. She typed back, "Arrogance has a cost. Tonight they pay it." She set the phone face down on the table, and without raising her voice, without standing, without so much as adjusting the straps of her orange gown, Naomi Sinclair ended the future of a billionaire heiress. The orchestra resumed its song, a bright, cheerful waltz that felt painfully out of place. Because somewhere in the city, the Waverly Empire had just begun to fall. Quietly, beautifully, inevitably. The fall didn't begin with a scream. It began with a notification. A single red banner flashing across the top of the Waverly Foundation's private network. Alert. Capital infusion. Terminated. At first, no one understood. The message looked like a routine system, ping the kind that pops up and vanishes before a technician even thinks to blink. Then came the second alert, then the third, then dozens cascading like a digital avalanche. In the control room backstage, a young technician's face went pale. We have a problem." He tapped the headset frantically. "We have a very big problem." Meanwhile, on the ballroom floor, the Waverlys continued their performance. Charlotte laughed loudly at a joke she didn't actually hear. Richard adjusted his cufflinks with the strained elegance of a man pretending not to feel the ground moving beneath him. Then Lena, the CFO, stood so abruptly her chair nearly toppled. Her tablet screen was exploding with notifications. Bank withdrawal request denied. Bridge loan dissolved. Asset audit triggered. Sinclair Equinox access revoked. Partnership documents withdrawn. Liquidity threshold breached. Her throat tightened. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a delay. This was a coordinated shutdown. She stumbled toward Richard, gripping his shoulder with white knuckles. "Richard," her voice cracked. "The Sinclair deal, it's gone." He blinked at her as if he didn't understand the sentence, as if the words were in a language he'd never been forced to learn. "What do you mean, gone?" he hissed. Before she could answer, her tablet refreshed again, and the spreadsheet she'd been clinging to turned blood red. Charlotte noticed their panic at last. "Is something wrong?" she asked, irritation overshadowing concern. Lena swallowed hard. "Everything is wrong." Across the city, the Waverly Empire trembled. At Harper & Drake Investment Bank, senior partners froze mid-meeting as disclaimers flashed across their monitors. Waverly accounts flagged, high risk. Recommendation: suspend credit immediately. At Northline Pharmaceuticals, where Waverly held majority stake, a compliance officer stared in horror as their operating capital evaporated in real time. At Waverly Real Estate Holdings, automated systems locked down new project funding. Contractors were instructed to halt operations. Emails began bouncing back from frozen accounts. It was a financial cardiac arrest, and every artery led back to Sinclair Equinox. Back in the ballroom, Richard finally snapped. He grabbed Lena's tablet, scrolling with shaking hands. "How did this happen so fast? We were stable!" Lena shot him a look so sharp it could cut marble. "No," she said. "We were pretending to be stable. Sinclair was the only thing holding us together. Without their capital," she inhaled slowly, as if steadying herself for impact, "we're insolvent." Charlotte's face drained of color. "That's impossible," she whispered. "I haven't even met this Sinclair person yet." Lena's silence was answer enough. And in that silence, the truth finally pierced Charlotte's armor. She turned, scanning the ballroom, eyes darting over gowns and tuxedos until they landed on the woman in orange, still sitting serenely, still untouched by the chaos she had choreographed. Naomi wasn't panicking. She wasn't sweating. She wasn't pretending. She was waiting. Charlotte's breath hitched. "No," she muttered. "No, that can't be her." The orchestra's melody cracked mid-bar as the lead violinist sensed the energy shift. Guests glanced around nervously, picking up fragments of tension without understanding the source. Then the news hit their phones. Financial blogs, investor feeds, business networks breaking alerts faster than the ballroom could breathe. Waverly Foundation loses Sinclair partnership. Immediate market impact. Expected Sinclair Equinox withdraws. $3B. Support. Waverly Empire facing collapse. Sources. Triggered by incident at gala. The room erupted in whispers. "Did you see? Is this real? Oh my God, their stock is crashing, look." Charlotte clutched the back of her chair as if it were the only thing preventing her from collapsing. Richard pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. Lena stared at Naomi like someone witnessing a solar eclipse, horrifying, magnificent, unstoppable, because the empire they built on arrogance was coming apart, and Naomi Sinclair had only lifted a finger. The first video hit the internet 13 minutes after Naomi pressed initiate. A shaky phone recording Charlotte Waverly, emerald gown blazing under chandelier light, jabbing her finger like a weapon. "You don't belong at this table." 6 words. 6 centuries of arrogance behind them. Someone posted it on Twitter with the caption, "Old money still thinks it owns the room." 5 minutes later, it had 40,000 views. 10 minutes later, the hashtag was trending across 3 continents. Number belonging isn't yours to give. Number Waverly exposed. Number Sinclair moves. Silently, influencers picked it up. Journalists smelled blood. Academics wrote threads. Celebrities reshared the clip with fire emojis and thinly veiled commentary. But the real damage came when someone zoomed in on Naomi. A still frame of her sitting completely calm, not crying, not arguing, just existing with a dignity so unshakable that it made Charlotte's rage look clownish by comparison. The internet loves a contrast. This one was nuclear. Meanwhile, at the gala, the shift was palpable. People who had laughed earlier suddenly straightened their posture, adjusting their expressions as though trying to rewrite their roles in the scene. A woman in a diamond collar whispered to her husband, "Delete any video where I'm in the background." A donor discreetly stepped away from Charlotte's circle. A board member excused himself and hurried toward the exit, phone glued to his ear. The music attempted a waltz again, but the orchestra sounded shaky as if even the instruments feared association. Phone screens glowed across the ballroom like tiny blue lanterns, each one reflecting the same horrifying headline. Waverly stock down 37%, within the hour investors flee. Sinclair Equinox silent Charlotte felt eyes turning toward her, not admiring, not supportive. Assessing, calculating. Her perfume suddenly felt suffocating. Her gown, once exquisite, now clung to her like a costume she didn't audition for. She stumbled a step toward her father. "Dad, make them stop posting it." Richard didn't answer. He was staring at his phone, jaw slack, as red graphs plummeted downward. In 37 years of controlling wealth, he had never seen numbers fall this fast. Lena, the CFO, whispered urgently, "The board is demanding an emergency call. They want to know if the rumors about the incident are true." Richard gripped the back of his chair. What rumors? But he didn't need Lena to explain. His phone buzzed again. A reporter had posted, "Sources say Sinclair's withdrawal was triggered by racial discrimination at tonight's gala." The comments exploded. Good. Consequences finally came with teeth. Sinclair Equinox doesn't miss. Old money is rotting in real time. Who is the woman in orange? I need her story now. Back at Naomi's table, the waiter who had hesitated earlier approached her with trembling hands. "Mom, the whole internet is talking about what she said to you." Naomi looked up at him, serene. "People reveal themselves," she said softly. "The world simply amplifies the truth." A young socialite walked past, suddenly offering her a nervous smile, the kind reserved for someone whose power had just become unmistakable. The camera phones no longer pointed at Charlotte. They pointed at Naomi. Her silence had become the story. Her composure had become the headline. Her restraint had become the warning shot echoing through every corner of the ballroom. News networks cut into their evening broadcasts. Anchors spoke with breathless urgency. We're witnessing an unprecedented collapse of the Waverly dynasty. Sinclair Equinox's silent move has triggered a market-wide reaction, and social media is calling this the most expensive act of racism ever recorded on camera. Charlotte felt the weight of the world crashing down, not slowly, but all at once. Her hands shook, her breath shortened. Her empire, the life she assumed was untouchable, was being shredded in real time. And yet, Naomi hadn't stood, hadn't shouted, hadn't demanded anything. She merely watched the truth move through the world with the precision of a blade she had forged long before tonight. The Waverly name wasn't slipping. It was unraveling. By the minute, by the tweet, by the consequence. Charlotte didn't walk toward Naomi. She staggered. Her heels clicked out of rhythm against the marble floor, each step a fractured echo of the confidence she once wielded like royalty. Eyes trailed her not with admiration, not even with pity, with morbid curiosity, with the dawning understanding that the heiress was no longer a fixture of power, but a spectacle of consequence. Naomi, her voice cracked on the name she had learned only minutes ago, learned too late. Naomi finally lifted her gaze from the soft glow of her untouched water glass. She hadn't moved for almost an hour. She hadn't needed to. "Miss Sinclair," Charlotte corrected herself quickly, breath shuddering. "Please. There's been a misunderstanding." Naomi studied her with a calm so precise it bordered on scientific. "No," she said. "There hasn't." Charlotte swallowed hard. "But I didn't know who you were." "That," Naomi interrupted gently, "was the mistake." The room froze. Charlotte clasped her trembling hands together, emerald silk rustling like crushed leaves. "My father didn't mean for any of this to happen. Our foundation, our companies, they're collapsing. People will lose their jobs. Families will suffer. You can't let this happen over a moment." Naomi blinked once, slow. "A moment?" Charlotte nodded desperately. "Yes, I wasn't thinking clearly. It was emotional. The pressure everyone expects things of me. And her voice cracked again. "Please, I'm asking you to reconsider." Naomi rose. The simple act felt seismic. She stood with quiet posture, not towering, not intimidating, just undeniably present, a still force that made the chandeliers seem to dim in acknowledgement. Around them, breath held. The orchestra had stopped entirely. Phones hovered like a constellation of judgment. "Charlotte," Naomi said, her voice low but carrying effortlessly. "You insulted a stranger because her presence threatened your illusion of superiority." Charlotte's eyes filled. I didn't mean." Naomi stepped closer, her heels whispering over the marble rather than striking it. "You didn't ask who I was. You didn't ask why I was here. You simply decided I couldn't belong." Charlotte flinched as if each sentence were a scalpel. Naomi continued. "You built your identity on inheritance. I built mine on work. I don't fear being in rooms I didn't earn. You fear being in rooms without inherited power to protect you." Charlotte's breath hitched. Sorry. But it wasn't an apology. It was a plea. Naomi's expression softened, not with forgiveness, but with clarity. "You're apologizing because you want your empire back," she said. "Not because you understand why it fell." Charlotte's voice trembled. "I can learn." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Learning requires humility. Humility requires reflection. You've had neither." She reached the final step toward Charlotte, stopping close enough that the heiress could see her own fractured reflection in Naomi's calm, steady eyes. And then Naomi delivered the sentence that would be replayed on every news network by dawn. "Power doesn't collapse in a day, Charlotte, but arrogance does." Charlotte's lips parted. No sound emerged. Behind them, Richard Waverly pushed through the crowd, his composure splintering. "Miss Sinclair, please, this is a misunderstanding. We can renegotiate. There must be something we can offer." Naomi turned to him with the same measured calm. "You had something," she said. "Trust, integrity, respect. You traded all of it for appearance." Richard felt the words land with surgical finality. Naomi stepped back, addressing them both. "I didn't collapse your empire. You built it on fragility. I simply stopped holding it up." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Charlotte's mascara stained her cheeks. Richard's hands shook at his sides. And Naomi, without raising her voice or breaking her composure, turned away from them not to escape, but to end the conversation. She had said everything that needed to be said. The rest was consequence. The collapse of the Waverly Empire rippled through the city like a silent earthquake felt in boardrooms, on trading floors, inside hushed black cars racing down avenues. But inside the ballroom, Naomi Sinclair moved with the unaffected grace of someone who had already shifted her focus far beyond the ruins she left behind. She did not revel in their downfall. She did not linger to watch the Waverlys unravel under the weight of their own choices. Naomi had always understood something the Waverlys never did. Power isn't proven by who you destroy. It's defined by what you build afterward. As Charlotte sank into a chair, sobbing quietly beneath the weight of global humiliation, Naomi walked toward the edge of the ballroom, where the event coordinator stood stiff as stone, clutching a trembling clipboard. "Is the donation ledger still open?" Naomi asked. The coordinator blinked, startled. Yes, ma'am. Though I'm not sure how many guests are still." Naomi nodded once, cutting gently through his panic. "I'd like to add something." He fumbled to hand her the tablet. Her fingers glided across the screen with the same calm precision Shed used to dismantle a billion-dollar dynasty. Under the line labeled Special Allocations, she typed, "Sinclair Equinox Community Summit. Fund $2 billion. Immediate release." The coordinator's breath collapsed into a single stunned exhale. $2 billion? "Mom, are you sure?" I'm certain," Naomi said. She pressed, "Confirm." And with that, the capital she had withdrawn from the Waverlys didn't vanish into hidden accounts or corporate vaults. It flowed outward, redirected with surgical intention. To after-school STEM programs in overlooked neighborhoods, to grants for black women entrepreneurs whose ideas had been dismissed by the very banks that funded the Waverlys, to legal aid networks protecting tenants from predatory landlords, to mental health initiatives for young people of color in districts where funding had been gutted, to scholarships under the name Sinclair Horizons, honoring the community centers where Naomi herself once studied after school. Money doesn't disappear. It chooses a new direction. And Naomi just chose one powerful enough to shift the landscape of opportunity for an entire generation. Word of the fund spread instantly. Phones buzzed across the ballroom again, the same way they had when Naomi collapsed the Waverlys. But this time, the notifications carried awe, not shock. Naomi Sinclair announces $2B Community Fund within minutes of withdrawing from Waverly deal. A collapse and a renaissance, all in the same night. This isn't revenge, it's reallocation. Influencers reposted it. News anchors repeated it. Activists cheered. Economists tried to explain the scale. And yet, Naomi remained untouched by the frenzy, as though she were operating in a separate timeline entirely, one where dignity, not spectacle, was the driving force. A young woman from the catering staff approached her hesitantly. "Miss Sinclair, I just wanted to say thank you. What you're doing, it matters." People like me, we feel invisible at events like this. Naomi turned to her with a soft, steady smile. I know, she said. That's why visibility isn't enough. Opportunity has to follow. The woman's eyes glistened. Naomi squeezed her hand before stepping away. Behind her, the Waverlys watched not just ruined but rewritten. Charlotte stared at the donation ledger on the screen, seeing the name Sinclair in bold letters where hers once belonged. Her empire collapsed. Naomi was building something that would outlast all of them. And for the first time that night, Charlotte understood the enormity of what she had lost, not just wealth, not just status, but the chance to stand beside someone who wielded power with intention, not vanity. Naomi paused near the exit, taking one final look at the glittering ballroom, a room that had tried to humiliate her, and instead became the stage of her quiet triumph. Then she stepped into the night, the city lights rising to meet her like constellations she no longer had to chase. By dawn, the Waverly name had fallen farther than any stock graph could measure. Richard resigned before the markets opened. Ethan fled the city under a cloud of subpoenas. Charlotte issued a public apology. No one believed her voice thin, her eyes hollow, her empire already picked clean by creditors circling like quiet vultures. But Naomi didn't watch the news. She stood in her office overlooking the awakening skyline, the city bathed in soft gold. Behind her, the $2B Community Fund was already moving, grants approved, programs launched, opportunities expanding like light through a cracked door. Rachel approached gently. It's done, she said. All of it. Naomi nodded, hands resting calmly on the railing. Good, she replied. Power isn't proven by how loudly you answer disrespect, but by how quietly you redirect its consequences. Below, the city pulsed alive, shifting, rebuilt in her image. And far from the marble ballroom where the insult was born, the world understood the lesson. Dignity doesn't shout, it transforms.